Hey guys, this is Nick with Smith Ford Strength and Conditioning, and I'm here with another exercise for y'all. Last time we had talked about the hip flexor stretch, and the one that I showed you happened to be in a kneeling position, and we demonstrated that with Corey. And I know that that's not always possible just to get on the ground, or if you have a yoga mat, whatever you may use to stretch that out, that may not be available to you. So I wanted to give you guys another option of ways to stretch those same muscles out, but in different positions. So today I also wanted to show you a standing hip flexor stretch, and I want to show you a more specific hip flexor stretch to address the rectus femoris, and that way you need to use that with a chair or even your couch. So today I wanted to show you those two and demonstrate how those can all be as part of your toolbox to help address those hip flexors. So let's start off with the standing hip flexor stretch. So to start the standing hip flexor stretch, we begin with our footing. What I tell my patients initially is to start with their feet together. And then depending on which side that they're trying to stretch, we then intend to put the opposite foot forward. So let's say, for example, we were trying to stretch my right leg. I would start with their feet together, tell them to take a step forward with their left, just a normal step like as if they were walking. The right leg will then be the trailing limb and the intended limb to stretch. Foot is forward, my right leg is back, I'm intending to stretch the right side. A little tip for y'all, I tell people to kind of bring their trunk just a little bit forward. So by doing so, we can kind of pre-position to get our hips forward. Now, a common thing that I tend to find with people with this stretch is that when they're trying to lunge forward, they tend to extend too much in their back, and sometimes it can irritate their back pain if they have any. So to kind of avoid that potential problem, by bringing your trunk forward maybe like 10 degrees, we can then start with our pelvis position. So to get the maximum amount of stretch out of this side, we want to put our pelvis into a posterior tilt. So that posterior tilt will allow that maximal stretch. And so the cue I give my patients typically is tuck your tailbone underneath you. Or if you think about your pelvis as like a bowl, you want to tip the bowl out backwards. So in the position, trunk slightly forward, and then we tuck our tailbone underneath us. Now, by doing so, I'm pretty much vertical, completely upright, and that allows me to get the maximum amount of stretch without compensating anywhere else in the chain. Now I want to talk to you about the chair hip flexor stretch. As mentioned before, there are a few other hip flexor muscles, but two that we're kind of addressing are the two big ones, the Iliopsoas and the Rectus Femoris. Now, what makes the Rectus Femoris special is that it crosses two joints, so it crosses both the hip and the knee joint. So in order to get its maximal stretch, we need to put the hip into an extension moment and our knee into a flexion moment. Now, using the back of a couch or a chair can allow us to utilize both of those movements and optimally stretch the rectus femoris muscle. So I want to show you guys the way that I like to show my patients how to stretch this out. And all you need is a chair. So if our intent is to stretch the right leg, as mentioned before, that leg is going to be the trailing limb in which that we have behind us. So we can use the chair as kind of our backstop. So I'm going to get into the position. Now in this position, this puts the hip into extension as mentioned, and it also bends the knee or puts it into a flexion moment. So just like with the standing position, we kind of have our patients bias their trunk forward a little bit, and then we tuck our tailbone underneath us, putting us in a very vertical position. Now this is a pretty aggressive stretch. I feel this. My hip flexors happen to be quite tight, and this is a really good stretch that I like to utilize for whenever I need to stretch them out. So same holds, 30-second holds, and then you can obviously switch. Now a couch might be a little easier for you guys to get onto, and this does take a little bit of acrobatic motion to get into the position that we need to stretch it out. When in that standing position, I want you to hold that stretch for 30 to 45 seconds. Most research shows that that amount of time is plenty to get the job done. So for those who are having that kind of hip flexor tightness from sitting, I always recommend, if you're going for a long drive, if you've been sitting for a while at work, as soon as you can get up from your chair or your seat, I recommend just doing 30 seconds of that, just to kind of undo the amount of tension that you've put in that from the sitting position you were in. Now, after that 30 seconds is over, I recommend taking a break. I usually prescribe 3 to 5 sets of those 30-second holds for my patients. And so for you, if you have the time to do so, I recommend it. Now, if you happen to be at a sitting job where you happen to be working for 8 hours a day, I highly recommend at least getting up every hour. So if you can do at least one of those stretches on each leg every hour, you could be doing yourself a lot of good. Now, it doesn't matter whether you are in that standing position or you're in the seated position. So with the chair, that can be very helpful if you're at a workspace or if you happen to be at a place where the chair or the couch is around. It's just another way to kind of take care of yourself. So ultimately, it doesn't matter how you do it. You have a bunch of different options now. We've showed you the kneeling, we've showed you the standing position, and also with the chair. So I look forward to showing you guys some more exercises in the future. And this is Nick with Smith Ford Strength and Conditioning.